G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel, and today I'm going to be going over my round 6 AFL tips and predictions, as well as going over round 5 to see how many tips I got correct, and as well as going over the big calls to see if I've got to do a punishment for this week. So let's go over round 5, let's see how many tips I got correct. I actually had a pretty decent round. I got 7 out of 9. I got my first 7 tips correct actually, so I was on track for getting 9 out of 9. I tipped Brisbane, Western Bulldogs, Sydney, St Kilda, Adelaide, Melbourne and Carlton. But Essendon's poor performance against Freo really let me down. I had to obviously tip them, and then I tipped Geelong. And Hawks got the upset win in an Easter Monday Classic. So 7 out of 9, I'll still take that, even though I'm a little bit disappointed about the last 2 games, because there was a chance I could have got 9 out of 9, but that's not to be. My big calls were actually pretty successful. It was actually quite a successful round 5. I got 3 correct. The first one was that the Dogs have 33 or more scoring shots. This actually happened whilst I was at the game. I logged it live, so yeah, that was pretty cool. And then later on the other Good Friday game, I got my second big call correct, where I predicted the Swans to score 7 consecutive goals or more against the Eagles. And then I got my third one correct, which was between Adelaide and Richmond. I predicted Tex Walker to kick 5 more goals. I got this game spot on. I tipped Adelaide in an upset, which was, you know, most people probably didn't tip Adelaide, and I got the big call correct. And not only that, I also helped someone win a $125 multi because they put Walker on to kick 5 more goals. So if you're watching this and you want to win your multis, you listen to my big calls, because, you know, they work. They've worked for some people. So yeah, not a bad round 5, and because of that, no punishment for this week. However, there is still last week's punishment to do, which was AFL Legends, and that was for me to do my tips on a Omegle. So essentially, people on a Omegle do the tips for me. And I don't really want to do that because I'm actually doing alright in the tipping from the last week. So I want to continue my good form, not get randos to pick random results. But let's get right into things regardless for round 6. The first game I'm definitely most looking forward to. It's going to be a massive Friday night clash between GWS and St Kilda. And you'd argue there's 2 sides on the different ends of the spectrum in terms of form. The Saints, they're one of the most informed teams in the comp at the moment. They've won their last 4 games. They've changed their playing style around their game plan. They've definitely improved in the midfield, like Sinclair, Crouch, Ross. They're all improving from last year, and obviously the forward line's connecting. We're efficient up forward, and our back line, our defense is also solid as well. So we're just a balanced side at the moment. We're playing pretty good footy. The Giants, well, they've been very disappointing. They've started 1-4. And, well, not many people probably would have predicted that. I thought the Giants were going to be a good side and make the finals, but 1-4, not too many teams make finals after finishing 1-4. And last week, they looked really, really disappointing against the Ds. I mean, the first quarter wasn't too bad. They should have been in front, but they just weren't able to take their chances in front of goal. They didn't look like scoring a goal, and then they leaked 10 goals in a row in that third quarter, or 10 in the quarter. It was just a really poor outing from the Giants, and they look like they're not playing for each other. They look like they don't really care, and they're not really putting in the effort that they really should be. Even though the Giants are in some poor form, it is at Manuka Oval, however you want to say it, and I will actually be going to this game, so I'm really excited for that. Of course, though, Toby Green will be back for the Giants, so that could be a huge factor in this game. I reckon he could be the X factor, he could be the difference, and I feel like the Giants, if they come out to play, they could win this. But I would back the Saints in, but I'm going to see what the people on Omegle have to say.
Giants.
Alrighty, well, they said the Giants, so I've got to tip against what I personally reckon will happen. I've got to go the Giants here. I'll go the Giants by 8 points. And my big call will be that Higgins, Max King, and Jade Gresham combine for 10 or more goals. They've been in really good form as of late. The next game on the Saturday is at Mars Stadium between Western Bulldogs and Adelaide. The Dogs, they needed to respond after their slow start to the season, and they did. They got a comprehensive victory over the Kangaroos by, I think it was 68 points, and they pretty much dominated from the start of the game to the finish. They kicked 8 goals in the first quarter, and the game was just about done after quarter time. I know the Roos kicked like 4 or 5 goals in a row in the second, but the Dogs had full control of the game for majority. Norton kicked 5. The move having Bontempelli up forward really helped them, because they've been relying on Norton too much this season, the Dogs, and it really hasn't been working for them. But they got their strings together, and they got a good win. And they're going to be playing against Adelaide, who are actually looking alright. I mean, when you really think about it, they're 2-2, but they've had 2 losses under a goal against Freo and Essendon. They win those, we'd be viewing the Crows a completely different way. They'd be 4-1, but they're 2-3, but they're playing some good footy. Josh Rochelle and Taylor Walker look like a dangerous combination up forward at the moment. Look, I don't think Adelaide will win, but I think they'll take it up to the Dogs. I think they'll definitely give it a red-hot crack. Bulldogs usually play alright at Mars, so I think you got to back in the Dogs here. And they've got a pretty favourable draw for the next 3 or 4 weeks. They probably should win their next 3 or 4, honestly. So I would go the Dogs, but let's see what the people on Omegle have to say.
Dogs.
And they go the Dogs. Great. All right, there's a tip that I wanted to get done. A big call, considering it's at Mars. It'll probably be windy down in Ballarat. There'll be 12 more behinds than goals scored in the game combined. The next game is between Port Adelaide and West Coast, 4:35 at Adelaide Oval. This is for sure one of the more intriguing fixtures that we've seen, but it's probably not for the reasons that you probably were expecting. Of course, the Power are the only side yet to win a game so far this season. They were really, really poor in the first half against the Blues on the weekend. I didn't watch the first half. I just checked the scores and I'm like, geez, how crap are Port? 50 points down. They did turn things around though in that second half. They played with more spirit. They played fierce footy. They looked like they actually wanted to win for once, but they just fell short. The Eagles, they were bitterly disappointing. I know they didn't have McGovern or Natanui, but that's not really an excuse to put up a poor performance like that. They didn't even score for the first 48 minutes of the game. I think that's like a record, or like a record for a while. That hasn't happened in ages. So the Eagles just didn't look good at all. I personally feel like this game is going to be close. I know both sides have been poor, and a lot of people probably think, oh, it's going to be a close game because of how bad the two sides are. I reckon one side will get a big lead. So, see what Omegle have to say.
Power.
They say the Power, which is the team I was going to predict anyway. And my big call will be that the biggest lead of the game is 50 or more points by any side. We move on to the Saturday night game, and this is going to be a really good contest between Fremantle and Carlton. These two sides always play off in absolute crackers. We saw Jack Nunes, we saw Mark Murphy, and it always seems like Carlton get the edge over the Dockers. I want to see the form. Carlton have won their last 4, and 3 of them have been pretty close games. So obviously the Dockers had the rough end of the stick in this matchup, but I feel like right now the Dockers are in a little bit better form. They dismantled the Bombers on the weekend, especially in that third quarter. I think they kicked 7 goals. Tabner kicked 7. Yeah, but they were just too good for them. They actually look like a complete side, and I think they've got like a differential of 100 plus 182 for scores for turnovers. Compared to against. So they're playing good footy at the moment. They probably should make the finals from where they are at the moment. And the Blues are also playing some good footy, sitting 4-1, but they haven't really been as convincing in their last few outings. They got out of jail against the Hawks and the Power, and they had that loss obviously against the Suns. If they lost those 2 games, which they could have easily lost, they would be sitting 2-3 and in a pretty poor position for them at the moment. So they're lucky to be where they are at the moment. I think this could go either way because it's always a close one between these two sides. But because it's at Optus, I would lean on the Dockers if I were to tip the Dockers. But let's see what the Meagle says. Just pick one. And they say the Blues. So we've got to tip the Blues. Again, I could see this happening. It is a 50-50 game, just about, I would say. And my big call is that Andrew Brayshaw had 30 or more disposals and 2 or more goals. We move to the next game. We've got North Melbourne taking on Geelong at Blundstone Arena. This is actually the first of 2 games in Tasmania this round, which is the first time I can remember that being the case for a home and away round. North Melbourne were pretty disappointing last week against the Dogs. I know the Dogs are a class above the Roos, but you still probably should be putting in more of a competitive effort against the Dogs. I mean, you lose by 67 points or whatever it was. You lost by 128 the last time these sides faced off on Good Friday. They haven't really been able to take it up to the occasion for Good Friday. Even though they were alright in that second quarter, they almost got back into the game, kicking 4 or 5 goals in a row. But we're not very good, the Roos. Whilst the Cats, on the other hand, were also quite poor. Didn't watch much of this game. I only watched like the last 10-15 minutes. But many people would have expected them to beat the Hawks. They were definitely the clear favourites for that game. But for some reason, weren't able to get the job done. Hawthorn just seemed like they wanted to win that game more. So I don't know if you let the Cats off, considering that this was an Easter Monday game, and regardless of where the sides place in the ladder, it's always going to be a close battle. Hawks always take it up to the contest, or are there some concerns for the Cats? But they're still probably going to make the top 4 nonetheless. And versus North, if there's any stadium where North can win this, I guess it would be Blundstone, but I just can't see it happening. Geelong are a clear superior side than North, and it's a game they just need to win. So I've got to go the Cats, and we'll see what Omegle says.
Cats.
And they say the Cats. There we go. Another tip that I probably should get right. So, to be fair, actually, I'm looking at the tips. Majority of the tips are ones that I would actually predict myself through Omegle, so not bad. And my big call is that North Melbourne have more scoring shots than Geelong. The next Sunday game we've got is between Gold Coast and Brisbane for the Q Clash. The Suns were okay against the Saints last week. I mean, they were in the game for a half, but they just got beaten by a better side, and it probably didn't help how Shaun went out late in the game. They got pretty badly beaten in the midfield aside from Took Miller. The Lions, they got a win, but might not have been as convincing as probably others would have expected against the Pies. But the Pies played well. We've got to give them credit. The Lions they needed to get the win, and they did, and they've now 4-1. They're sitting pretty nicely, but similar to Melbourne, or just about, they haven't really been putting sides away. Like, genuinely, they could have lost to Port. They could have lost to Essendon if Essendon kicked straight early on. And, yeah, of course, they could have lost to Collingwood. They only lost that game by 7 points. But I wouldn't say there are too many concerns right now for the Lions. They're looking quite sound at the moment. I don't know if I give the Suns a chance. I mean, I know it's a Q Clash. Anything can happen. And the Suns, they are quite a bipolar side. They can play well one week. They drop the next week. It could happen. They could win the Suns, but it's very unlikely. So I think I'll have to back in the Lions. But we'll see what Omegle says.
Songs.
And they're going to go the Suns. All right, there we go. If there's an upset this week, which there probably will be, let's hope it's the Suns to beat the Lions. My big call is that there'll be 4 or less goals scored at quarter time in this game. The next game, we've got Richmond taking on Melbourne, the Anzac Eve clash. Melbourne was so good against the Giants on the weekend. I was at the game and they were clinical. Maybe not necessarily from the first bounce, but that third quarter, that goes to show how well these can play when they want to. And obviously they don't need to so far in the season. They haven't really played their very best footy, but in that third quarter, 10 goals in that quarter, and 10 individual goal scorers. I don't recall that ever happening. If that's a record, it probably is. Got a record of, 5 wins in a row, whereas the Tigers, their last 5 games, loss, win, loss, win, loss. They're extremely bipolar. They're super incredibly hard to tip. They were okay against the Crows, but again, they just weren't up to the contest. But judging from the streak, from the form, you could argue the Tigers win this one and bounce back and get a win. But I mean, against the D's, I don't see them losing their next game. The D's, they look complete. The Tigers have a few issues, but I guess anything can happen at the G for the Tigers. But I will back the D's in.
Demons.
And so do Omegle. They also back the D's in. So that's good for my sake because I can't see the Tigers winning this one. And my big call will be that May and Lever combined for 16 or more marks. So we've got 2 more games left, and these are the 2 games on Anzac Day. The first one is at UTAS Stadium between Hawthorn and Sydney. Both sides were pretty impressive. They both recorded 2 quite convincing wins. The Hawks pulled off a really classy upset against the Cats by a couple of goals after a really poor performance against the Saints. They got done by 70 points. And for a Saints perspective, it almost makes a win against the Hawks look even better, considering they knocked off the Cats. They were very good. I mean, Dylan Moore kicked 4 goals. Newcombe had 31. He had his best game. Mitchell had 24 touches in that second half. He was part of the reason why they turned things around in that second half. Sydney were also extremely clinical against the Eagles on the weekend. At one stage, the scores were, I think, 56-0, something crazy like that. They ended up winning the game by, I think, 60-odd points. I didn't watch too much of this game, but they finally found a bit of form against a poorer side, playing some pretty good footy. I could see this going any way. Hawthorn are the side that really can beat anyone on their given day. And at UTAS, they are a better side, you could probably say. They always seem to pinch these wins at UTAS. They play better at UTAS, the home away from home. But you'd probably expect the Swans to win this, although it's almost a 50-50 game. It's a tough one to pick, but luckily I'm not the one picking it. So we'll see what Omegle has to say.
I think Swans.
And they're going to go the Swans. So the team that's probably going to win. A big call, though, is that the Hawks score 6 or more goals in any quarter. And then the last game of the round, of course, is Anzac Day, the classic Essendon v Collingwood. But Essendon were just really disappointing against the Dockers. They're in a shambles at the moment. They're not making finals with the way they're playing. They're just soft. They just didn't really put any pressure on the Dockers in that third quarter. When the game was on the line, they just sort of let them waltz in and kick goals for fun. It's quite concerning right now for the Bombers, honestly, and their defence is becoming a problem. They've conceded the most points against for any side, and the lowest score they've conceded this year is 97. So they've been leaking over 100 pretty much every game. The Pies, they were all right against the Lions. I mean, they only lost the game by 7 points. I thought they'd lose by more. They've been playing some good footy in their even though they've lost their last 3 games, they haven't been out of the contest, any of them. I mean, they should have beat the Cats really up by 5-6 goals. Should have beat the Eagles. I mean, they had countless chances to win that game. They had more inside 50s, more scoring shots, and then they could have beat the Lions. And they should win this game based on form. I think they're a better side than the Bombers. They've been playing a lot better footy. Their brand of footy has been a lot more convincing. But let's see what Omega will have to say. And they're going to back in the Pies. There we go. So the Pies win it, and that's probably going to happen. But again, you never know with the Bombers what they can produce. The combined scores for both sides will be over 210. Alrighty guys, those were my tips for round 6. Not really mine, they were Omegal's tips for round 6 because that was the punishment. So Omegle went GWS, Western Bulldogs, Port Adelaide, Carlton, Geelong, Gold Coast, Melbourne, Sydney and Collingwood. So round 5, who did the best? I forgot that this was like the Joker round, so you get double points. So we've got 6 that got perfect score. We've got Lochman, Arnold, Riley, you legend, Jacko, Glenn, No Walk, Hawthorn, Chips and Graz 10. There you go, Graz. And we'll quickly have a look at the total score to see who's on top. Noah Skeeter up by 1 on 43. Then Banger Harvey on 42. We've got a few on 41. Lion Baldo, Kyle on Dianella. And then Ollie 166 as well on 41. And then we got a bunch on 40. And then we got, yeah, a bunch on 39. So if you see a name, again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I think over 50% of you guys are still unsubscribed. I mean, subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the future. Again, if you want to comment down a punishment for me to do for the next tipping episode. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon in my next video. Cheers.